we're now ready to create an animation blueprint. Now this animation blueprint is basically going to tell our character how to animate depending on what parameters are currently available. Basically what the player is currently doing. So in my animations folder again, I'm going to right click, I'm going to go to animation, I'm going to create an animation blueprint. Again, make sure you connect it to the right skeleton. I'm going to call this beeps ABP, animation blueprint. Then let's open that up. Now this output pose is what's going to be playing on my character. Right now, there's nothing plugged into it, so my character won't animate. We want to create something called a state machine. And this is going to work out what animation should be playing depending on what we're doing. So I'm going to right click and just type in state machine. There it is, state machine there. I'm going to call that default. And let's plug that in. And I'm going to open this up. So double click it and open it up. Now, I want to pull a strand out and I'm going to say, let's add a state. And this state is going to be called idle. So as soon as the animation blueprint starts, as soon as the blueprint is available, it's going to enter into this idle state. So let's open that up. Double click that. And it's asking me, right, what output animation pose should I be playing? Well, that's easy. We downloaded an idle pose earlier. So on the right hand side here, I'm just going to click the tab for Asset Browser just here. I'm going to pull in idle and plug it in. Now if I compile, you'll see I've started animating the idle animation. And that's because it's entered that state and it's started playing that animation. That's a good sign. So make sure that yours plays this animation. I'm going to go back. Now to go back, you can either click this little back icon or you can click on the actual pathway. So I'm going to go back to the default. Now I want another state. I want to have a moving state. So I'm going to pull a strand off of idle. And I'm going to say add state again. And this one's going to be called moving. I'm going to double click that. And this time there's not a single animation that should be playing. Because moving is a very broad, vague term. As long as you're not stationary, you're moving. So the blend space is going to work this out for us. So down here, let's just drag that blend space in and plug it in. Now direction is not important, but speed is. So for now, we're just going to do this for one of these. We're going to do it for speed. We right click speed and promote that to a variable because we're going to need to access that variable later on. Now if we compile, we'll see an error, or warning in this case. Let's go back to the default and it's saying, the warning is basically saying, I don't know how to get from idle to moving. I can't do it, it's impossible. And that's because we need to do something about this icon here. That's a transition state, or a condition I often call it. This condition has to be met in order for us to move from idle to moving. So just to create this, just double click that transition. And when this is true, we'll move from idle into the moving animations. Now, logically think about this. How do we transition out of being in an idle state? In this case, our speed needs to be above 0. So let's just give that condition. I'm going to pull speed in from the variables down here. I'm going to say get speed. Pull a strand and I'm going to type in greater. I'm just going to use the operator greater. Plug that in. And that's it. That's done. If my speed is greater than 0, we'll transition to the moving state. That logically makes sense. So now if I click compile, lovely. It's happy with that. It's accepted it. Back to default. Now, in this case, I'm not done though. Because once I'm in moving, I can't exit moving. So I've got to drag another strand from moving and plug this one into idle. And it creates a transition going backwards. So let's open that one up. Now this is going to be just as simple as the last. I'm going to drag speed in, get speed, and this time I'm going to type in less and equal. Less equal. And plug that in. So this time this one's going to say, alright, if I'm less than or equal to 0, transition back into my idle state. And it'll go back and forth. Click compile, and there we go. So this is a very simple state machine. It's going to just calculate going back and forth. You can make these much more complicated if you'd like to. For example, you can have some fall-in states, or you could have some aim-in states. So if you've got a gun, if you hold right click, you could transition into an aim-in state, and that could use different blend space. But they all work like this, and you can just transition between them. It's important that you set this up for your own needs, really. Okay, we're now going to start programming this, and in this case it's going to be quite simple. We're going to head over to our event graph just at the top here, and you should see two nodes. We're going to use both of these. So try and get the pawn owner, so that's going to be the character that we're controlling. I'll pull a strand out here, and I'm going to say get velocity. Get the speed at which I'm going. Now that outputs a vector, and I don't want to use a vector, I want to use a float. So let's pull a strand from return value, and we're going to say vector length. And that'll take that vector and it'll turn it into a float based on that vector length, and that's what I want. I'm going to get speed, drag that in for my variables, and this time I'm going to say set speed. I'm going to plug the main output and input pins into each other, and then plug the return value from vector length into speed. Now when I click compile, we should get this red flashing line going to it. Amazing. It's all linked up, and it should now work correctly. So once you've followed all those steps, you've set this up, your state machine should look as such, and you should have the correct transitions all set up. Make sure you followed the video through, and make sure that all of those are linked correctly. If they're not linked correctly, then it's very possible and very likely that your animations aren't going to play. So once it's all done, once you've got this red flashing line, you're ready to move on to the next video.